Today, we once again focus on top secret trading techniques for Tesla. In particular, I wanted to focus today on the 750 put, where it went from basically a 300% gain in one day to a 100 or 99% loss in 1 week. So we wanted to review those numbers and use the exposure to allow you to learn more about options trading and the potential benefits and pitfalls. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. We also want to thank our Patreon supporters. If you enjoy the show and like tips and tricks on better investing and trading, please join us on Patreon. If you like, please take time to like and subscribe. We also want to note that this is a copyrighted broadcast. Please stop copying our show. That way you can keep your channel and we'll do the same. I also wanted to note today we do some trade consulting. So if you'd like some help, you have a larger portfolio, I would like some help in the thinking process on some of the stuff we do, happy to engage with you in that regard. Hit us up on Teslafaninsight on Facebook with a private message, or fcp1@AOL is an email address you could reach us at. So I did a show yesterday, and the first thing I wanted to do is list a couple of comments. The first one I'm posting is, this is a very irresponsible thing to do, and I would acknowledge it is. And the reason it's irresponsible is that if you get into options trading, you can either make a lot of money, stay even, or lose a lot of money. All those are on the table. And that's part of the reason why I haven't done these type of shows before, partially because we do private sessions with folks, but also because it can be very difficult. It can be very easy for beginners or even pros to do it well and easily and make money, but it's also a way one can lose a lot of money very quickly or make a lot of money very quickly. So the other thing I wanted to post there is, this is a look at some of the returns people got in one day on Friday. So you can see 99%, for options that were at 750, 112% for the 745s. So those kind of returns in one day is a reason why people take on this crazy risk or try to figure it out. So I just wanted to give you guys a feel for how all this worked. And the show is kind of broken up into two areas today. The first area is I specifically wanted to review from 10 different angles what happened on Monday. And then the second thing I wanted to do is, probably a third of our folks that watch our show are banging at the 500K plus neighborhood, $1 million in shares or more. And we wanted to give you some fairly conservative tools with which to manage your portfolio better and more profitably, which is kind of what we did in round one, but I'm going to do it again in round two. So if you're in the first 10 minutes of this show, we're really targeting novices on this, like, what is this? How does it work? Why should I spend any time trying to figure it out? And the answer is monster returns. So one of the things that caught my eye in the responses was one of our respondees made a comment where he said, hey, Monday morning you can be a Monday morning quarterback and your predictions and analysis is perfect. Very good point. The thing though is that there's a word called empirical. So one of the funniest things that happens on my channel is we explain what the market makers are doing, why do they do it, and how it works. And then we've had a lot of people make a lot of money over the last year and a half. We had one kind of our students go from 50K to $10 million in 1 year. So there's money to be made at this. It's just that most people end up getting smashed. A small group of people work hard enough to figure it out and deliver. And this whole realm, highly risky, etc. So because of that, I wanted to ask you a favor, which is please just put a Y as in yes or an N as in no, and then send relative to this type of show, because it is top secret. We aren't going to do them very often. This is the last one likely for this week until Friday. And the goal here was to have sort of a top secret space where I can just say this never happened, and we don't know how you learn this stuff, etc. The final note I wanted to make precursoring is the fact that a lot of the information, most of the information I've given to you guys in the last few shows on options trading and investing, we actually charge folks for classes on this. We do have classes we can send out to you. And so therefore, I would like to request that you consider sending us $3 or $4 on our Patreon page, or not our Patreon. We possibly Patreon if you'd like to join us there for sure, but we also have a setup on Venmo. We have Cash App, and we also have PayPal. So we'd appreciate you taking some time, send some kind of donation. The suggested donation is $4, but if you want to send more, send less, fine. But it does take time to put this together, and there's a lot of expertise presented. And I was even shocked because I have a friend, a new acquaintance, that was saying that they're actually starting a class on options on Monday and have paid, I don't know what the tuition was, but in general, for this kind of exposure and experience, it can actually cost a lot of money. And so please take time to support or join our channel. Now, to get into today's topic off of the beginning slides that I started with, the focus of my conversation today is just the fact that, hey, there's something called a 750 put. Now, if we go back to last Monday, you'll recall that the stock closed a week ago, Friday, at 759. Basically, when it opened up, it was on the way down on Monday because the market news talked about the Evergrande problems and how that was going to hit the market. And at one point, the market went down, from what I could see, about 950 points. It might have gotten lower. And then that took Tesla with it, initially down into the 730s, then all the way to 720. So what I'm wanting to review today is kind of what happened, how to view it, and how might you do what I call unpacking the information that's lurking there, because there's a lot of data flying in every different direction. And if you get involved with options or an exposure to them, it's going to be useful for you to take some time to globally understand what's going on. And then, just like a tub, let's say you want to get in or not, if the water's too hot, do not get in it. But there may be ways that you want to use your knowledge to do a fairly conservative process for having options exposure that could actually be very lucrative. So what I was fascinated by is, and why specifically I'm focused on the 750 puts, is that they illustrate the comments that were made prior to the show today. The first thing to note is that when we started out in the morning, 750 was where the stock price was. At that point, the 759 was where the stock price was of Tesla. At that point, you likely couldn't have gotten it that Monday, but let's say Friday, which you're establishing your position the week before, if you theoretically put up, let's call it $2,000, you would have been buying the 750 puts while the stock was at 759. By about noon on Monday, when the stock got to a low of 720, those puts were now selling for basically 3.5 times. So somewhere around $5,000, maybe $6,000 is what they were selling for. And guess what? I didn't earn any of that money because I didn't have puts in place. Usually Mondays are up days for Tesla. So even though it was 759, I was actually expecting it to go up. But this is neither here nor there. The goal is to introduce you to what's happening so you can sit back and go, wow, that does or doesn't make sense in terms of would I even consider putting money up to try to figure this out. So then what happened was those 750 puts, let's say they were at $5,000 a piece. What then happened is the stock bounced up to 730 and cranked up into 735, and it started making this comeback. Now, if you're sitting on puts in this fashion, one of the things I pointed out was, wait a second, it wasn't known if Tesla was going to 700, 650 based on a market that seemed to be crashing. So one of the challenges and opportunities I think that's out there is something I call scalping, or it's generally called scalping, which is all you're doing is saying, hey, I'll take 100%, I'll take 200%, but I'm not going to get greedy and try to pull off 400 to 500% in one day. Why not? Because things can turn around like this. So if you got your nice 100%, 150%, 200%, I'm thinking that's a great time for you to say adios versus trying to wait for the extra and get smashed. So if I were trading that situation, the logic that I would be running on would be to say, hey, and I had a chance to watch it. The stock was falling, fell to 730-ish an hour into trading. Market's still falling. At that point, you're up a nice 150% on your puts. Great time to sell. And then the stock continued south, and you're thinking, oh, darn, I left some money on the table. Better leave some money on the table than have all the money taken back from you that was on the table. So we did a show to just suggest that things are down right now, but it's actually a buying opportunity for Tesla. Great time to pick up some shares. And as you saw, the stock recovered nicely. Now, what's really interesting here, and why I kind of decided to do this show today, is what ended up happening is those 750 puts that rose to 3 or 4 times their value Monday morning based on dropping. By Friday, when Elon did his thing, the people who had those puts and had made some money, if you had stayed in and tried to get every last dollar, you would have been crushed. Because as the stock price fired up north, it basically turned those 750 puts into zero, and the calls became valuable as we rushed up to 774. Now, I have to say that I'm really, really, really shocked by the stock moving up like it did, and here's why. Elon announced that he expected the semiconductor issues to end middle of next year. Now, that's good news. Here's the problem. What is the problem? The problem here is that there is the 3-day rule, which would take 3 days before we start seeing how the market makers respond to this news. But I was very surprised by this happening because, well, what does that mean for Tesla? And what I mean by that is Elon has given us the impression that there's a minimal impact of the chip shortage on Tesla's production. So, so what I'm confused by in this little trade situation that happened on Friday with this pop-up is that he said it should end by the middle of next year, but does that affect Tesla's production at all, given that they had planned their semiconductor purchases 2 years ago as they prepared to open up these factories? So they would have a little bit of a crimp on their numbers, but nothing like some of the large OEMs not used to doing large numbers of semiconductors have had. And we're seeing this right now where Tesla's gaining market share because they have access to chips that other people don't. The other thing I deduced from all this going on is that, if you may recall, when there was a shutdown in Texas, about a week worth of Samsung's chips that go to Tesla were interrupted by that power issue in the winter. So it highlighted the fact that instead of having stuff shipped in from Taiwan or other parts of Asia, Elon's supply chain was still in Greater Austin, which means that when the folks at Samsung indicated that they were going to expand production, they said they were adding to an existing factory. They did not say they had to build a new factory. Different party. Adding to factories can take a year and a half. Building a new factory can take 2 to 3 years for a whole bunch, to make sure this thing is running properly. So basically, the thing I don't understand is that what this is suggesting is there was like a 25-point discount on Tesla's stock price related to the question of would they be able to get enough chips. And I'd have to say that it's entirely possible, but I'm dubious of that. One of our viewers, David, actually pointed out that he thought Monday would be a down day for Tesla stock, only because people come to their senses and the stock falls consistent with this. Yeah, I kind of agree with his position, but what I'm actually thinking though right now is there are a lot of people that are trying to accumulate shares before the stock takes off after we know what production was for the quarter, production and sales. So we'll see how all this plays out, but that's my general take on where we're at. So basically, the 750 puts are an extremely great training ground. You saw them jump up in value, and then over time through the week, they lost a whole bunch of value as the stock price rose. Now, for those of you who are large holders of Tesla, I highly, highly recommend that you consider buying some puts. Call it 5 or 10 grand, maybe even 20 grand if you have $1 million account. And here's why. If the stock price drops, you make money on the puts and you still have your stock and you're fine. If the stock price goes up and you have a decent sized portfolio, the cost of the puts, or the insurance is what we could call it, is relatively low compared to the value of your portfolio. So I think if you have a larger account, 5 or 10 grand worth of puts is going to take you, depending on the number of shares, obviously, it'll take you maybe 6 or 7 points up of Tesla to consume the losses you might have on your puts. But in essence, you're creating an insurance policy against huge drops in the price at the same time. And this is actually how options, particularly puts, were expected to be used as a hedge to your portfolio. So in general, I think that options can be risky if they're not a hedging tool like I just described. If you're choosing to buy or sell puts or calls, that's one way to go. Obviously, there's things called naked puts and calls, which means you have unlimited liability. When you buy a put or a call, that's a way to make money if the stock moves in the direction that you've anticipated, either down or up. Now, there are people who do things like covered calls where they own the stock and they decided to sell a call against shares they already own. I've had one of my good friends who's been doing 3 to 5% a month doing covered calls against shares that he owns. And yeah, there are tax problems, but if they're inside your retirement portfolio, there aren't any taxes. So this is an interesting other technique for you to consider that's fairly conservative that can be very lucrative. So I wanted to kind of run these by you guys because there are a lot of ways to use options. There are a lot of ways you can make money, a lot of ways you can lose money. But I wanted to generally give an idea of why people put so much energy and time in trying to understand this. And therefore, they can do very well if they both understand and are able to blend that understanding of the market and the understanding of options together to deliver a return, which I think is entirely possible, but it does take work, and a little bit of luck wouldn't be a bad thing to be in the mix. So, at any rate, I wanted to note, again, we have a few SpaceX shares to consider. You can drop us a note at the email below. We also wanted to ask you to consider pitching in $3 or $4 if you thought the information from these two shows was useful. We also want to remind you this is a copyrighted broadcast. None of what's said are you allowed to use without permission. We next want to move on to our health tips. I was thinking about when we came up with the health tips, my goal was to fire them off as quickly as possible. That way people wouldn't even notice. At the end of the show, it's kind of an open space for me to present ideas and concepts that are not having to do with Tesla, but I think will be beneficial to the demographics of our show. So a couple of things I wanted to point out today, again, are we have a gentleman who is a upper respiratory doc and a professor at University of Louisville that I spoke with. And he looked at me, I asked him, what health tips would you give to folks based on your specialty. And he said, the thing you should be aware of is there are a lot of people that are very busy these days. So the trend is for people to come home, eat, and immediately jump in bed. What he shared was the problem with that is that your stomach bile, i.e. the acids that digest the food, will actually roll up into your upper respiratory area, and if you do it often enough, can cause cancer. What he also shared was a lot of people think they're getting around it by using acid reflux, stuff like Tums or over-the-counter stuff, and he said that you can get what feels like relief, but the reality is that the damage is done. You're just getting sort of topical relief, or you're getting relief from it, but it's definitely having an impact and should be noted. So his further point was, don't go to bed within 4 hours of eating. Ideally, minimum 2 hours allows the food to be partially digested before you get into bed, was his suggestion. And so hence what I'm sharing. And feel free to ask your doctor about it, because I think there's a high likelihood you'll find out that it's not BS. The second thing I wanted to cover today, which we do have on our list below, is I was thinking about a weird crisscross of information that I came across. And that is, I have a friend I went to high school with, and her dad's a doctor. Throughout her life, up into her early 50s, she's always carried an extra 30, 40 pounds that she didn't want, and went to numerous doctors to try to help her to figure out how to deal with that weight. So finally, this one doctor made a comment to her where she said, "Hey, Susan, I want you to, for the next, I want to say month or month and a half, you can't eat anything that that is not something you can read and understand." So basically, the whole idea was some of the new processed foods, etc., out there are really bad news in terms of a lot of our health, and that was kind of the deal. Now, I found that comment really interesting because it fits with another conversation I had, and the conversation was with one of our show advisors, who's a kidney doc, and he suggested that there have been a lot of new processed things that your body doesn't know what to do with, that we've come up in the last 50 years, and your body's like, hey, I don't know what to do with that stuff. Why don't I just store it next to your organs? And this is part of the reason why I have a lot of people with type 2 diabetes. So I just wanted to let those be our 2 health tips for today. We will have some more ocean sounds at the end of the show if you'd like to enjoy that after our show is over. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Tschüss, au revoir, Lihitrod, Khoda Hafez, Strazuche, Ni hao ma, konbanwa, Arrivederci, Hey do, Swedish, konbanwa, Japanese, Namaste, Hindi, and in Jamaica we say, Enough respect, walk good man.